Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Pleasure Mnisi, who's a mining manager at Exxaro Resources. And he's going to talk to us about his passion, which is around the subject of moving from digital strategy to operations. Pleasure has an industrial engineering background and been in the mining industry for over 15 years. And he's worked for companies like Anglo American for nearly a decade, and was also nominated finalist for the South African Rising Star in Mining and Minerals back in 2020. He's also going to be speaking at the upcoming Mines and Money event in London at the end of November. So to be sure to reach out to him if you're there. Also tickets, if you want tickets, they're going to be in the show notes accompanying this podcast. There's also a discount as well. So let's get straight into this podcast, and that's welcome Pleasure. How you doing, Pleasure?
No, I'm great, and thanks, Rob. For a minute I thought you were talking about someone else there, eh?
No, that's what I found. That's what I found online with you. And congratulations, obviously, for being a finalist. So, as we always start these podcasts off, I wondered if you can give the audience a brief overview of yourself, about your career, and about your background.
No, thanks, Rob. I think you've already touched base on a bit of my background. So, industrial engineer by background, very much disruptive background for a mining manager. I think traditionally you find mining engineers being mining managers. So really got over 15 years in mining, different roles in Anglo American and also with Exxaro. So I filled in very strategic roles where I look after business strategy, looking at the entire organization as to where do we position Exxaro for the future. And then we also looked after the digital transformation. I think it's a subject that a lot of people are got to interact with, a lot of people globally, and also we'll be speaking about in the Mines and Money conference that's coming up. And then also looked after business improvement or operational excellence and performance, where you're looking at bottom line basic things about productivity, cost and safety, and really how to impact the bottom line and make sure that you get the desired business outcomes. Other than that, I'm married to a beautiful wife, Mnisi, and also with two girls, so very passionate about women empowerment as well.
Yeah, certainly. And I bet your household is very difficult sometimes with three females onto one.
Yeah, definitely. We need a gentleman. We need another gentleman in the house. So
yeah. So obviously, from your experience, what are the key challenges your organisation has faced when embarking on such a transformational strategy?
Look, I think I've spent about. I think I've been around 15 operations, in mining alone. So just in my 10 years in Anglo American, been around all the coal operations, and was fortunate enough to also spend time in Los Bronces, one of the big copper mines, and also with Exxaro, one of our biggest coal mines, Grootegeluk, underground operations, both in Anglo and Exxaro, and also the open cast operation. So the reason why I'm making such a reference, and also the Australian metallurgical operations, where we implemented some of the management operating systems in my time with Anglo. The reason why I'm making such reference to all these operations is that commonly problems or challenges that mining companies suffer tend to be similar. So when we particularly talk about the strategy or the digital transformation, what I've learned or what we picked up is that a lot of these operations do not know where to start. So you get to attend, you get to conferences, hear great innovation that is taking place, and also get to talk to your colleagues across the world doing great stuff. all this digital fancy words, data science. You hear words of automation and cloud and all of those things. But I think as a simple miner, all miners need to know is where to start. Where do I start eating this big elephant? I think in my lesson, and when I joined Exxaro in particular, where I had to decode and really relook at the strategies that they had put in place, we started looking at some of the innovations that they had put in place. And what we picked up is that they had a big consulting company. I'm not going to mention in particular which consultant company is. And they came across, get a whole lot of ideas, I think about 800 ideas or so, on terms of what to do to transform the operations. And then that didn't go well, and then they all of a sudden looked for another consultant company. And then that also came up and added on top of it. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not a shortage of ideas where to start, but rather it's more of what problem are you trying to solve. So I therefore looked and worked with a team from the various departments, from IM, operations and so forth, really understanding what is the problem that we're trying to solve. What is it that we're really solving for? And what is the big picture that we're trying to achieve over a long period? And I learned that once that was defined, it was quite easy to fill in the missing words in between that. So what do I mean by that is, firstly, we had to come up with a bold strategy. So the bold strategy was very clear that we needed a 40% uplift in the next 5 years in terms of our bottom line. And majority of that value should be coming from the transformation strategy that we're embarking on. And secondly, it was also a link into the market cap to say, from where we are, where do you see ourselves in 5 years' time in terms of growth, and particularly what role this strategy plays. And lastly, is that what exactly is the trapped value that exists within the system, and how will this transformation help the organization unlock? And we figured that once we clarified that, it became much more simpler. We were not looking for ideas, but rather we were solving problems. And in the process, there were ideas that were solving those problems. And most importantly, we also looked at learning from the industry. So the industry has a lot of point solutions. So what we call point solutions is every part of the value chain tend to have a lot of innovation that they're doing within those pockets. Some refer to it as silos, but we refer to it as point solutions. And often enough, it's really out of a good intent to have those point solutions. But what it tends to do is it optimizes silos, not necessarily unlocking the entire value chain. As you can imagine, in anything that you do, if you only optimize one part of it, you'll see the best of that part, but not necessarily getting the whole entire value chain benefit. So really, I think in a nutshell, majority, not just Exxaro or Anglo American, also majority of the people that are in mining industry and my colleagues, they tend to suffer from where to start.
You mentioned obviously there's plenty of ideas. It's obviously understanding where the problems and challenges are and what needs to be solved. Would you say a lot of the operations that you've come across, there's similar problems and challenges amongst those? Is there a common theme?
Yeah, certainly. I think mining is the same. I mean, if you're talking to an underground operator, will tell you that it's all about safety first, making sure that the employees are safe, you're able to track them where they are, making sure that wherever the sections that you're cutting, whatever commodity, that it's safe and it also can do that efficiently. and reliably. So, and also knowing what the problem is in real time so that you are able to take corrective action. And also visibility of that particular value chain is quite important, knowing exactly in real time what is happening so that you can respond appropriately. I think also similarly, if you look at open cast across the world, similar kind of challenges, really your overburden stripping, what we call the topsoil and so forth. You need to open up to get your ore or whatever commodity that you're mining. And that tends to be one of the key bottlenecks in majority of the mining industries. How you handle contractors becomes one of the similar kind of challenges. I've worked at, like I said, Los Bronces. That was one of the key bottlenecks that really we suffered. I worked also in most of our coal mines in Anglo American, similarly, and the same year with my current company. So mining companies in general tend to have common problems.
Culture plays a major role in any organization or strategic transformation. How do you drive the correct culture to get people along and I suppose all on the same journey?
Yeah, look, I mean, culture, they talk about culture, it's a strategy for breakfast, right? And if you don't have the right culture, you're as good as dead, you know, and one needs to understand what culture is. It's how we do things here. And if you're looking at the transformative strategy, like the digital transformation, for instance, it's really changing how people do things. And it's really taking a lot out of personal experience that people have had. And in some cases, it actually challenges personal experiences because you know, you've got accurate data that is not biased, that doesn't have feelings, that strictly look at the facts. So all of a sudden, you have to make fact-based decisions from intuitive, dominant decisions that are based on experience only. I'm not taking away intuition and experience, but I'm saying it's a huge culture shock that has to take place. It really at the leadership level and also across the organization in terms of how you do things. So one of the key things in terms of culture is that in mining, one of our core problems in culture is bigger is better. So whatever that we want to do, we want a big truck, you want a big machine, you want everything bigger. We tend to think of it as better because I've got a big truck so I can load more tons. But I think, again, you know, when you're looking at the innovative world and the digital transformation, it's talking more about factual decisions and getting data to find trapped value within the resources that you have. So, for instance, and I like giving this example, is like you look at your navigator, right? So back in the days, I know in South Africa, we had what we call the Atlas book, where it gave you all the maps for all the towns and all of those things that you had to use to get to a certain place. So culturally, you were expected to have a book in your car that you would read to get to a certain destination, right? So from there on, I think technology came through. You had your own Garmin that you could put on the windscreen with a pre-programmed software, which would then now take you closer to the place. But if there was a change of address or change of a street, it will still take you into that bush or wherever that it last updated from there. And then fast track to what is happening today, you've got live Google feed of exactly what you're driving against and the traffic and real speed and real activities that are happening. So certainly, if you had to interpret culture shock, you'd look at somebody that is looking at that book, looking for a street, trying to draw a road to get to a certain place, calling, getting lost, all of a sudden to a real-time fact-based direction guide that tells you this is the most cost-effective way, this is the speed that you're going to drive, this is the time that you're going to arrive, there's certain traffic officers on the road, there's an accident. And even while driving, it can also tell you that, you know what, this road is not optimal anymore. Rather change direction because of this and that. So it's a real culture shock if you take similar concept into a mining environment. And if you really understand mining, you'll understand that mining is really a legacy game. It's all about legacy. It's all about experience. It's all about history. So you taking everything and challenging it to much more technology fact-based conversations, which therefore changes the way that people work. So, and I'll elaborate more. I mean, in South Africa, you also have another challenge where majority of our operations are labor intensive. So you introducing disruptive technology in those spaces where chances are you need to take away repetitive tasks that people do and then introduce some of the repetitive tasks through technology to do some of that work. You're also not relying on people. That means you probably tend to change the skill sets of your labor that you have, which also then changes culturally the interaction that takes place with the workforce. And then also in terms of decision making, mining is quite capital intensive and very much not as agile, to change and adopt to things. And like I mentioned in my navigation example, the latest way of doing navigation is quite agile because it tells you the challenges that are there. But mining is not as agile as the latest other industries, like startups and so forth. So what you tend to find is that by introducing technology to these operations, it requires a change in mindset, starting from the leadership perspective, and then also the general workforce, and also how you interpret what we call problems and challenges within the operations. And very much heavily reliant in terms of facts and data-driven conversations. So what did we do? I mean, we understand what it means, but one of the things that we do is we realize that with the traditional mindset that we had, it was not going to get us where we're supposed to, especially when you're dealing with something that we're not sure of, because I think majority of technology companies, it's a trial and error. You try out something, you get feedback, you look out for the next solution and so forth. But mining is quite costly to do that, because by nature you cannot buy something worth millions and millions and then say, no, it's not working, go change that. You will be bankrupt very soon. So one of the things that we introduced that really helped greatly was what we call the startup culture. I think if you want to know more, there's Eric wrote a book, The Startup Way. So what the Startup Way talks about is that what makes the smaller companies successful. And one of the things that we learned and that we had to teach the organization was, how do you find feedback quickly and change what needs to be changed so that you have a better product. And we started introducing the language of minimum viable product. So instead of going for a massive waterfall kind of project approach, we would come up with a smaller version of what we want to do, test out the concept, and then see whether it works, get the feedback, and then implement. And that really helped fast track the culture in terms of decision making. The other thing that was quite challenging and how we sorted it out was, as a listed company, there's a lot of bureaucracy, governance, and all the regulatory work to be able to be auditable. But in hindsight, that also brings delays in the process. And when you're talking about technology, you cannot afford to wait such a long time to get feedback. So we had to look at our governance processes within the organization. We also had to train the workforce in terms of what does agility mean and what does a startup way mean? To give you another example, during that time when we're doing this, there's a mine called what we call Belfast Digital and Connected Mine, really our flagship in terms of digital transformation. So the mine was projected to start, I think, in end of 2019. And through this concept, we started looking at how is it possible that we can start up a small box cut, start mining there, and test the entire value chain of the entire mine and the technology that we need in that mine. And if it works on that small box cut, as we expand and complete the mine, continue to expand and develop on that technology. And that mine, through that innovation and culture change, was able to deliver the first coal about almost a year earlier than it was anticipated, which the market loves so much. So it was really more about the governance processes, decision making, the way that we think, and also making sure that people do not feel threatened by the technology. They see the opportunity that they play into that place. And the reason why I say that is that we often think that technology takes away jobs, takes away our role. But in mining, a lot has to do with core development. So we had to teach people that majority of the work, as much as it changes, there's a lot of core development and developing of new skills that then the unions became comfortable with. And as we speak, we haven't taken away any of those jobs that they were doing, but rather developed new technical jobs like data science, integrated value chain managers, and IM skills that were not there. And also look at business improvement guys that look at key decision making. We implemented things like integrated operation centers, where instead of working in silos from the different departments, we have a lead from the different parts of the value chain sitting together, monitoring the whole entire process, making decisions about the value chain in real time, chasing the same goal. And that has really even changed the interpretation of their role in the business. Instead of just making sure that they tip coal, they're now interested to know whether the processing plant is working or is on maintenance. And if it's not working, how do we then optimize the resources while it's still on maintenance and so forth. So that has been really one of the biggest culture changes. And one of the other ones that really made a significant impact is the way that we looked at business. I mean, traditionally, it's all about making sure that you're safe. Productivity is about producing more and more and more, and with less cost. And really, that has been the traditional miner. I think all the miners will agree with me that traditionally we're trying to do that. But I think what has been one of the culture changes that is really disruptive and can only be possible through proper deployment of digital transformation strategy was what we call the market to resource, where instead of just looking at those costs, more production and safety still remains there. But what we looked at was more, what does the market want? And how does the value chain align to what the market wants? So instead of just producing and stockpiling, which costs more, we're now dictated by the particular product and the qualities that the customer is looking for. when does the customer want a certain product, and how efficiently is it to run it at a certain time. So sometimes we actually would stop operations, take advantage of other activities because we've got insights of the market. And that is really like turning mining upside down. And it's not necessarily the traditional way that mining is done. And a lot of that work had to be done to senior leaders in terms of training and understanding that strategy, middle managers, and also the supervisory at the front line, and also the operators themselves to really reinterpret what optimization is. So it became much more focused on EBIT and the bottom line contribution of the business rather than just producing more and more. And that has been one of the biggest shifts in the organizations that was also driven by the technology transformation that Exxaro went through.
Obviously, now you're a mining manager. Have your views changed in some of the strategies that you were driving forward as a business optimization manager? And what do miners really need to be successful at the coalface?
Look, you'll never please a miner, I guess.
No.
But certainly, look, it's one thing talking strategy. It's another thing being on the coalface. And one thing that I've learned, and really, I spent a good 2 years driving strategy, as mentioned earlier, and a good almost 3 years driving operations. So the platform changes drastically in terms of what you worry about. So I think in the previous role was more driving adoption, making sure that there's clarity on the strategy, making sure that the goal is clear, making sure that we understand the problem, integrating the value chain, making sure that people are on the bus and that the leadership is driving the right message, and making sure that we, clean out the governance and support, and making sure that we do things, what we call were collaborative sessions, where we would invite people into an imbizo. In African culture, an imbizo is when the elders sit together with the larger congregation to put together minds and share ideas about certain things. So I would do that with all the operations to get input into that and look at what we can drive, what idea, test it in one operation and scale it into other operations. But as a mining manager now, driving those things, you've got contractors on site. Contractors are worried about a different thing. I've got a contract to move so much volumes. I need to come in, move it, get out and use as minimum resources as possible with less cost as possible and make the maximum profit. But then contracts are also time-based. It's like 3 years and so forth. And with the massive transformative strategy that you have, and you're going out to the market, there's no contractor that will come in every 3 years to bring that particular change. So it means that the cost of contractor becomes high. The culture in terms of what contractors, so it's more of a business partner beyond just the contractor. So you also need to look at strategies that advance development of technology, training of skills. Usually contractors bring their own people, and then at the end of the contract, they can take their key people. But then when you're driving a continuous improvement strategy, would continuously wants you to innovate and learn and relearn and learn and relearn, you tend to develop a certain culture. And when your key contractor keeps changing, there's a lot of losses in terms of culture that comes in. And I think really that has been one of the challenges that I faced. In the first year, I had to work with a contractor, look at the tracking of their equipment using data science. And in one case, in the operation, contractors contribute almost 60% of our cost. And that's a massive amount of cost. So it means attention in terms of the transformation for value would have to be in terms of the contractors. But then, as mentioned, that you're not worried about the same thing. You're worried about the future of the business. Contractor is worried about today's profit. You know, will I make it to tomorrow? So there is a big gap, right? Skills upliftment. How do you uplift somebody that only see a 3-year tenure in that operation? So really quite a dynamic space. The other one, it's really the challenges around, the energy transformation journey that we're in. I mean, coal is known that, due to the carbon emissions, it's really under attack to relook at the emissions that we have. So reinterpreting that, what it means into operations and making sure that we not only talk about it, but it's tangible in terms of the results and hits the bottom line. So we looked at the diesel efficiencies in terms of the trucks, looking at technology that we can use to move away from fossil fuels. And over and above that, it's really looking at the driver's behavior that consumes energy, which is where the biggest spend is. And then you also look at the design of the pit as to whether the way that you design, does it support efficiencies? And how do you use technologies to enhance that efficiency? So that was one of the key projects that I did. So also integrating of systems. I looked at integrating of diesel monitoring, driver behavior, steepness of the ramps or the areas that we're mining, and collaborate all those different technologies and tracking of human behavior to find more or less a common denominator within those systems and change the way in which we work. But in that, what has been quite different is the engagement that, you can do this analysis. It's one part, it's only the one part. But then the change management that is involved to get people to use this thing as a mining manager has been probably the most difficult one. So adoption, making sure that people are not forced, or the tools, they're not forced to use the tools, but the tools are working for the people. So that has been one of the key things. The other thing has really been around policy, right? Government policy is one of the key things that we're facing every day. Key stakeholders in running operations is the community in which you operate in, and the need for employment, the need for contracts, the need for local participation, which in the mining charter requires that the work that you do is about 30% of that. But then a mine is usually closer to a less developed area. The skills around the community is usually very less in South Africa. But the charter requires you to do about 30% of the work with that local community. So it requires different ways of thinking, of getting them on board to the same level of this transformative strategies that you want them to. And with the local dynamics of the community, it's sometimes a bit more challenging. And remember, in politics, in South Africa at least, every 5 years there's elections. If you're lucky, you get the same person, but chances are very high that you go through different leaders that drive different things within the 30% of empowerment that you're looking for. So those are real hardcore things that you find that are not necessarily in that space that you find at a strategic level, but are much more operational. The other things that I've seen quite, that was really insightful as well. at the operational level is also what we call the mineral integration into the value chain. So I earlier spoke about market to resource, where you look at the market and you design to say they're looking for this product. But then in reality, as an operations manager, the geology of a certain area might not suit the market at the time. So it's not as flexible to change the mining area to a different mining area that is suitable for that particular market. So that has been one of the key changes. So the losses that are associated with that are often not thought of at a strategic level, because I think strategy makes sense, respond to customer demand, make sure you do that. But on a geological front, there's certain geology that is good for certain area. And if you've invested to strip or open up that area, if you are closer to coal and you find that the market is not necessarily looking to that particular type of coal, you are therefore very much challenged operationally. But what we also did, we therefore started applying some innovation and intelligence around that space, where we've got a view of the strata, the geology, and as we mine in real time, it can tell us the qualities associated with that area, which therefore informs the processing plant what measures to put in place to respond appropriately, and also aligning with our marketing counterparts to see the entire value chain working. But it really takes a lot of collaboration. I mean, from your mineral resource managers, which is the technical department, the engineering, and also your processing, your stakeholders, and so forth. So the entire value chain. So in reality, it requires a lot more collaboration and teamwork to make it happen. And sometimes really the speed and reaction time into this might not be as much as we wish for when you're talking at a strategic level. And most importantly, what made it easier for us was the demonstration of value into these initiatives. And I think earlier on when I spoke about culture, it's very much easier to convince people or to get the journey going when people see the benefit. I think we had a goal of 6 billion Rand contribution to Exxaro, and for the trust and the participation becomes a little bit much more than really dragging people that are stuck in the traditional ways of things. So that is really some of those challenges that are quite different in terms of when you run operations. And lastly, you've got inspectors, right? We've got what we call the Department of Minerals and Energy that do inspections at the mine to see if we're working safely and so forth. And sometimes their standards or the expectations on the technology could be government driven that are not necessarily suitable to the strategy. So, that collaboration and alignment is one thing. The other external factors that have a direct influence as an operations manager like myself now is you have what we call the TFR, the railing government company that does the rail, the evacuation of coal to our harbor for export purposes. And currently they're supposed to perform at about 90 million tons per annum. And they're performing at almost 55 million tons per annum. So what it means is the work that we've put in 3 years to collaborate with them in terms of tracking value across the value chain all the way to the harbor to optimize what we call the market to resource, where we track what we're doing, where's the coal, what kind of qualities, what are we blending within the process to get the maximum value. That has been disrupted. So as an operations manager, yes, that is disrupted from a strategic point of view, but you still need to make sure that the mine evacuates the coal. So you look at road transport. But road transport is a totally different disruption to that strategy. So your whole technology trial that you would have put in place has now been probably, changed drastically, and you need to respond as operations to the need and the challenges that you're experiencing with the logistics that really are beyond your control. So majority of my role is to look at things that influence the operations that are beyond our control, but still make sure that we respond to that. And that really tends to be very much disruptive by nature. And yes, it enhances our views, and innovation, and the way that we resolve problem keeps on changing, and we've managed to respond very well. But it's a whole different ballgame. So the speed of execution becomes even 10 times much more important. And not forgetting that really operations is about people. So if people are not happy, there's all sorts of things that could happen. They can either demonstrate their unhappiness. You've got community that could also do that, not necessarily related to your transformative strategy, but more to personal interest. But that has a direct influence in terms of your strategies that you deploy. And lastly is nature. Of late, the climate change, you've quite experienced it. It's been raining a lot in South Africa. You asked me earlier when we did the intros, we're really experiencing excessive rains. So literally in terms of opening up your ore, you almost have 7 months in a year or 6 months in a year, where traditionally you'd have a longer period. But then that also forces for new innovation in that space, where you look at operations and digital or technology that could still be able to strip without necessarily depending on the weather. So you look, instead of moving trucks and excavators to load the material, you can look at slot dosing or automated dosing technology that can dose off material, which is less dependent on the rain and stuff, and can give you that drastic. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. And because of the labor issues that we spoke about, we would also look at autonomous trucks. So we started innovating in some of the operations within Exxaro to look at automated trucks, automated drilling, so that we really can respond throughout all the year in terms of doing what the business want us to do.
I've got two more questions. Obviously mining in South Africa, and obviously we're speaking about people, or in, I suppose, general sort of work within South Africa in the mining industry is very labour intensive. How is your organisation handling sort of any job losses related to the implementation of technology? And I suppose this can be not just necessarily South Africa, but other countries around the world within the mining industry.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's always a sensitive subject. I mean, once you speak about job losses, South Africa was sitting north of 30% in terms of unemployment rate. So really a personal, issue. I mean, being in the coal business as well, really a sensitive issue because of the climate change. So really the expansion of the coal. So it's really quite a sensitive space. People wanting to protect what they have. And I mean, with number one, facing, the renewable energy challenge. Now you're facing the technology within the coal space. So it's really quite a sensitive issue globally and also locally. But I think one of the things that we've been very successful at as Exxaro is also to focus on skills development. There's a certain level of skills development where we're looking at how do people adapt to avoid dying in the positions, because it's really about adoption rather than dying in the positions. Secondly, we've also sold most of the advantages. So if you're looking at the safety, one of the key challenges in mining is safety. and the fatality frequency rate has drastically reduced, mainly because of the contribution of technology. So we're saving lives within the mining space, and we've demonstrated that to the unions and also to our people. So they understand the need to actually use that technology to safeguard life. For instance, people are quite aware, and we've sold that idea that, look, instead of just only looking at technology, look at how it's saving lives. Number one, we introduced technologies where the trucks that we're using in the mine, they are automatic handbrake. You know, whether you forget to engage a handbrake or not, the moment you take off the levers, you open the door, it automatically switches off and engages the handbrake, which then safeguards and takes away and eliminates a lot of incidents that were there. We also sold, the idea and releasing the benefits of it, that they can blast remotely without being there. Blasting is one of the biggest contributor to multiple fatalities. So that has really helped, and they've seen that the use of underground gas monitors and technology associated with automatic operations of equipment also re-emphasize the benefits of technology in that space. However, you cannot take away the fact that people still do get a job regardless of the safety benefits. And what we've done is, what we did as an organization was to commit that from the labor force that we have, we were not gonna take away people, because really the benefit that you get out of making sure that you're safe, you drive productivity, you reduce cost, and you improve your EBIT from all the innovative stuff that I've shared with you, far outweighs some of the salaries that we're paying our employees. And South Africa, by nature, compared to the first world countries, the salaries are quite low. So our challenge was quite different in that sense, unlike the first world countries, where the salaries are probably the biggest part of the paycheck in terms of the cost of the mine. So we committed that we're not going to really retrench labor directly because of introduction of technology, which therefore eased people. We also committed to taking key individuals to next level kind of development. So as I speak, there were people taken across the operations, spent almost a year on data science, understanding the mystery around data science. What is data science? How do you use data? How do you develop insights from data? And how do you develop things that can help you solve problems within the operations? And people see that as career path and growth within that space. We, as mentioned earlier, we've also introduced new career paths like integrated value chain managers, where the sole job is to look at different role players that are sitting together and look at how the value chain is optimized. Those are driven by technology, much more exciting. The other thing is, we've also committed to take away repetitive tasks, which tend to have a lot of errors. And then now people are doing more meaningful work. And what we've seen with that is, we've also shown them that instead of doing manual work, you're now starting to engage in the work, because you're now doing insightful, key decision-making within that work. And those are really some of the things that Exxaro has put forward as a strategy to minimize the fear or the concerns raised around job losses.
And summarizing, what's the biggest value for your organization? And what is your advice to other mining organizations willing to embark on a obviously similar journey around obviously digital transformation?
Look, I think one of the key things is Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Keep it simple. Number two, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? You know, I think if organizations can always ask themselves before embarking on any strategic initiative, what exactly is the problem you're trying to solve, they'll save companies a lot of money. Because what we tend to see, or what we've learned, is that people go on this journey of this technology or whatever innovation, and then they try to find a problem to solve with that. And really that's a waste of people's time and money and resources. So work on a problem, start small, have a minimum viable product, and don't be scared to test out what works, what doesn't work. Usually what we've often seen is that the idea that you have at the start, ultimately when you're moving down the chain, the value chain, it ultimately drastically changes the face of that particular project. And people shouldn't be scared to adapt and get feedback from the users about the innovation or whatever drive that they're doing. And lastly, it's all about value, right? If you do not demonstrate value and making sure that you deliver on the bottom line on the EBIT, you will lose the senior support and ultimately the shareholder support. At the beginning of this journey, Exxaro committed about 2 billion towards digital transformation. And what happened is it was before COVID, right? And I think the market was up in arms. What are you going to do with so much money? And then fortunately, we did things like the integrated operation centers that could clearly demonstrate and see value. And we demonstrated about 5% upliftment across all the operations. We integrated the resource with mining, and they looked for unique problems, within mining. So that's very, very important. Mining has its own embedded unique problems. If we spend time understanding those and partner with technology companies or other innovative companies to solve those problems, we'll make a leap step change as leaders in that space. And I'll give you an example. Is loading and hauling contributes to about 60% of our cost in terms of mining globally. That's accepted. It doesn't matter which mine. But if we focus on that as the problem, and we've accepted it as a permanent fixed cost, but if we focus on that, we could reduce that cost to about 20%. And really that's what mining needs. We can learn from the farming industry, where they've even changed how they plant their seeds, how they water which soil and soil tests. So there were specific problems that are associated with that industry. And I think there's a lot more room in mining for us to look at the specific problems that are associated with our industry. So there's a specific room and opportunities to partner and solve specific problems that are associated to our industry. We can learn from the likes of even your automotive industry. A car, every year model that comes up with new learnings that solves a problem. For instance, my car now knows that when the person is behind, it automatically brakes. It's a problem that a driver always had, bumping other people, but they've spent time partnering to solve that problem. And I think really there's a lot more problems. Instead of just going around looking for the shiny gadget and adopting it, let's understand our problems, and let's understand what drives our fixed cost in mining, and let's partner to hit that fixed cost. And my challenge as an operations leader, as a mining leader, is to say, how do we take a minimum of 50% on traditional fixed cost through adoption of innovation and technology within that space? And I think it's possible. I mean, also empowering the workforce, making sure that it's safe. Those are some of the things that we can look at and really, really make sure that we do that. And be obsessed with the problem and culture. Make sure that the culture it's not a traditional one, but rather look at what the new startups are doing. I mean, startups, I'm talking about new companies. You look at the global top 10 performing companies, Amazon, all of this, they are all startups. And we in the legacy business, mining goes donkey years, hundreds of years. But how come in the top 10 performing companies in the world, it's only all these 10-year-olds, less than 10-year-old companies? It's mainly because of the culture, the ability to change when something is not working, solving particularly problems that affect that business. And I think we can learn a lot from that to change our industry.
Yeah, certainly. Pleasure. Really appreciate your time, giving us a really detailed description of obviously the new digital world and how we can obviously affect our or improve our operations, certainly mining operations. If our audience wants to reach out to you, what social media platforms are you on? Obviously, you're also going to be at the Mines and Money event. So I'm sure any of our audience who are going to be attending will certainly see your talk and obviously have questions for you and obviously approach you at the event.
Yeah. No, thanks. I think once again, thanks for the opportunity, Rob. Really, interesting podcast, and also the opportunity to share and learn from the mining community in the Mines and Money. So looking forward to that. I'm easily reachable on my LinkedIn, so really quite active on LinkedIn. Just look for Pleasure Mnisi. You should be able to find me. And then also Twitter, Pleasure Mnisi, you can find me there. And alternatively, my email address, which is pleasure.mnisi@exxaro.com. Those are the platforms that I'm easily reachable. And I respond to most of the people that need to interact or have a conversation or share ideas, and really also quite interested in the leadership space and what we can do as leaders in the mining space, and also investment into Africa and so forth within the mining and research space. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, certainly. We'll include those social media links in the show notes accompanying this podcast, so people can easily reach out to you. Like I said, really appreciate your time. Those that are listening, there's a lot to take away from that, and obviously we're moving into a new digital era, and obviously the mining industry probably always takes that little bit slower to adapt and adopt digital transformation. And obviously Pleasure's really outlined a lot of things that our industry can look. So those that are listening, appreciate your continued support. Please share this episode amongst everyone that you know in the industry, because obviously there's bits there that people can take away. No matter what you do within the mining industry, there's certainly a lot of things to unpack and listen, and hopefully you can take that into your operation. So thank you for listening. Please, if you're looking at going to Mines and Money, there's going to be information to get tickets in the show notes accompanying this podcast. There's obviously a discount ticket or discount code to get tickets as well. So until next time, happy mining.